G'day guys and welcome to Aussie English. My objective here is to teach you guys the English spoken down under. So whether you want to speak like a fair dinkum Aussie, or you just want to understand what the flippin' hell we're on about when we're having a yarn, you've come to the right place. So sit back, grab a cuppa and enjoy Aussie English. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I'm going to do another pronunciation episode, and in today's episode we are going to focus on the contraction of would not have. And there's a few different contractions. It gets more and more contracted depending on the speed at which you're talking when you're talking with another native. So you'll start with would not have, and then you can contract the not onto would, so you'll have wouldn't have. And then not written but spoken, you'll have wouldn't've. And then quite often, if someone has a really strong Australian accent, I'm not sure about American or English, they could also say it like this, but at least in Australia you'll hear wouldn'ah. I wouldn'ah, which is would not have, wouldn'ah. So you'll have would not have, wouldn't have, wouldn't've, and wouldn'ah. So again, this episode isn't necessarily to emphasize that you guys need to speak this way. It's more just to give you exposure to these different ways that would not have is pronounced by natives without them realizing when they speak incredibly quickly, so that you can understand what they're saying when they're saying it without having to ask them to repeat it, and you'll know instinctively. So I should probably cover first when and when not to contract would onto the pronoun beforehand, such as I would, he would, she would, we would, they would. It often becomes I'd, you'd, he'd, she'd, we'd, they'd. Sometimes you don't contract the would because there are other words following would that are contracted and it just gets too messy, and I think as a native speaker who listens, you would just miss too much of the message if all of those words are contracted. For instance, if you have would not have, you can contract all of those words in different cases, but because you've got three in a row, it would be I'dn't have or I'dn't've, and it'd be very weird. You wouldn't really get the message. So anytime you negate the sentence, that is, it's in the negative, you use the word not. So I would not have done, I wouldn't have time. Anytime the not is in the sentence and it's negated, it's in the negative, you don't contract would. At least, as far as I know, it sounds incredibly bizarre when I try and think about saying I'dn't have or I'dn't've. It's not said, so don't focus on that. But yeah, the little cheat is if it's negated, if there's a not in there, you would have would as its full word, and then you would contract either or both not and have onto would after the word. So for example, I would not have done that can become I wouldn't have done that, or it can become I wouldn't have done that. So that was the conditional past tense, but if it was just in the conditional, then you would have I wouldn't have time, I wouldn't have chocolate, I wouldn't have that much to say, etc. So if there's a not, don't contract would. Anyway, let's get to some examples. So say, for example, when talking about going to a party, if, say, someone made you go to the party and they thought you didn't have a good time, you could say, I wouldn't have come if I didn't want to. So even though that person is worried you didn't have a good time, you can say, no, it's fine. You know, if I didn't want to come, I wouldn't have. So I wouldn't have come if I didn't want to. I wouldn't have gone if I didn't want to. I wouldn't have come if I didn't want to. If someone's moving house and you've offered to help the person move house, and it turns out that moving has been a lot more work than that person anticipated before asking you to do it. And so you say, spend the entire day helping them pack their things, helping them move, unpack at the new house. and it takes a lot of your day up, the person could say to you, oh, look, I'm sorry it took so long. And you could say, if I didn't want to help, I wouldn't have. If I didn't want to help, I wouldn't have. Another example could be a couple go out on a first date, and one of them is an incredibly busy person and has to rush to the date straight after work. You know, they've got to get the tram, they're running effectively because they're worried they're going to be late because of their busy schedule. And the other person might say, oh, sorry, we probably should have chosen a better day. Today was obviously a bad one for you. And you could say, no, it's fine. I wouldn't have come if I'd been too busy. I wouldn't have come if I didn't want to come. I wouldn't have come. But it's fine. I wanted to come, so I came. One last example could be that someone could say something to another person who gets confused and asks, are you sure that's what you meant to say? And you could say in response, yeah, I wouldn't have said it otherwise. Yeah, I wouldn't have said what I said if I didn't mean it, or if I didn't want to say it. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't want to. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't want to. So now let's do a little conjugation exercise, guys, where I'll just conjugate the conditional past tense, and I'll go through the different contractions as they get progressively more and more contracted. So listen and repeat after me. I would not have. I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have. I wouldn'ah. You would not have. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't. He would not have. He wouldn't have. He wouldn't have. He wouldn't. She would not have. She wouldn't have. She wouldn't have. She wouldn't. We would not have. We wouldn't have. We wouldn't have. We wouldn't. They would not have. They wouldn't have. They wouldn't have. They wouldn't. So we'll do some more listen and repeat exercises here, guys, because I want to put these contractions into sentences with context around them so that you have a better way of remembering and understanding how and when you would use these different phrases. So the setup here for the phrases that I'll go through afterwards is that someone invites you to a party and it's inconvenient for you because you've got a really busy schedule, but you make the effort to go to the party anyway. So when you arrive, they say to you, oh, I know you were so busy, you should have just said you couldn't make it, you know? Like, I realized you were busy and had other things to do and that it was quite an effort for you to come. So you should have just said, sorry, I couldn't make it. And then you could say, and repeat after me, I wouldn't have come if I didn't want to. You wouldn't have come if you didn't want to. He wouldn't have come if he didn't want to. She wouldn't have come if she didn't want to. We wouldn't have come if we didn't want to. They wouldn't have come if they didn't want to. And now we'll just go through some random sentences. So again, some listen and repeat exercises here, but this time I'll say wouldn'ah instead of wouldn't have. So you get an opportunity to use both. I wouldn't have gone if I couldn't've. I wouldn't have come if I couldn't've. You wouldn't have asked if you didn't want to know. You wouldn't have been much older than me. He wouldn't have shown up if he didn't wanna. He wouldn't have stayed if he didn't wanna. She wouldn't have been awake that late at night. She wouldn't have arrived by that time. We wouldn't have played footy even if you'd paid us. We wouldn't have gone to bed much later than 10. They wouldn't have ever wanted to know. They wouldn't have seen you, I'm sure. So you'll notice in there also, guys, I'm sure if you go back, that I also contracted a few other things like couldn't have, I turned into couldn't've, didn't want to know, I turned into didn't want to know, and there's a few other ones in there. But again, it's just listen and repeat, practice this pronunciation stuff here, guys. If you have a bit of an issue understanding what these sentences are saying when I speak with a really strong accent with a lot of contractions, jump on the website. I'll have for these episodes the transcript out so you can read it and then practice your pronunciation. And this hopefully is going to really help you in understanding when other native Australians and other native English speakers as well who use these contractions speak to you. You're going to know exactly what they're saying straight away. So you'll pick up on it. You'll have heard it before when listening to these episodes, and it'll be like, oh, I remember that. Boom, it's all good. I understand. Anyway, this is a long episode, guys. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or any doubts or anything you want to talk to me about or suggest I do an episode in the future on, let me know on Facebook. Send me a message or a comment. If you can, also review the podcast on iTunes. That always helps. And don't forget to click like on these Facebook posts and share it with any of your friends who are also learning English. Thanks for listening, guys. All the best. Thanks for listening to the Aussie English podcast, guys. If you haven't already, please come and join the community on Facebook at www.facebook.com/the Aussie English podcast, where I make daily posts about anything and everything related to Australia. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, then please leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or whichever platform you're listening to it through, as it'll help the podcast grow. Thanks again, guys, and enjoy your day.